So, hello, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to hear a little bit about voice and market research. I tend to walk around a lot, so there may be some of this, which is why I don't put a lot of words on slides, mostly, but forgive me. So, my name is Jose Cotto, and I am the founder and CEO of True Reply. Infinitely more important, I am a dad to 3 little ladies and husband to a Wonder Woman. And a recent story I just had about a week ago happened to me. An associate actually asked me, straight-faced, what does it mean to be married to a Wonder Woman? And that's me. And my dad's calling. And he very straight-faced said, what is she, a superhero or something? And after I looked at him somewhat inquisitively, and yes, he is very single, what I responded to him is, well, at least as it relates to today, is that I get to be here with all of you and discuss voice and market research, while my wife, who happens to be an accomplished speech therapist, voice, is at home managing her career, helping raise our 3 daughters, and actually coaching all 3 of their soccer teams. So while I've spent the first decade, or the last decade, helping grow our family, professionally speaking, I spent the last decade also really working on technology to better understand humans and really predicting human behavior. So a lot of the work I do, who here is in market research specifically? So a lot of the work that I've done is not all that different from the work that you do, albeit from a slightly different perspective. So the first half of the past decade, I spent it really focusing on text-based communication. So platforms like Facebook and Twitter, analyzing human interactions on these platforms. And on that, I really leveraged natural language processing and artificial intelligence to better understand why we, as humans, say what we say, do what we do, and feel how we feel. So while I focused the first half on text-based technology, I focused the latter half, or the last few years, on voice technology and really conceiving, building, designing voice-based tools to better understand why humans say what they say, do what we do, and feel how we feel. That question of why has always been the cornerstone of modern market research. And it really started, some might say, in the 1920s by a gentleman by the name of Daniel Starch. Daniel came up with the novel idea that in order for advertising to be effective, it's got to be seen, read, heard, well, actually not heard, but voice should be slid in there, believed, remembered, and most importantly, acted upon. He took this concept to create one of the first US-based market research companies, and what they would do is essentially stop people on the street, ask them what publications they read, and based on the publications that they read, they would say, hey, what kind of advertisements do you remember from these publications? And that kind of market research, stopping people on the street and asking them what they remembered, didn't really change for the next 50 to 60 years. You've had names like George Gallup that introduced the data recall system that helped it move forward with new methodologies and new strategies, but it wasn't till the 1980s that a gentleman by the name of Ronald Lindorf had a novel idea of introducing technology to the process. And he brought in the telephone and introduced market research at previously unprecedented scale. He went on to form a small company you may have heard of, which was Western Watts, and Watts would later become part of Dayanara. Jump ahead another 10 years, and you've got the internet, and we've got online surveys, new methodologies, new modalities, virtual focus groups. So we really took a huge leap in just those 10 years. Voice, to me, is the next leap for market research. Voice technology today, both in like an application as well as in consumer behavior, is approaching very quickly the tipping point of going full-on mainstream. Many industry experts, myself included, believe that voice is the future of computing. It is going to be driving everything from your most simple consumer behavior, like ordering your Uber, to your more complex environments, industrial manufacturing, education, and healthcare. So when we talk about voice, one of the first things that we want to clarify is what does voice mean? And for today and for our purposes, what we mean is voice technology and the voice technology that's behind all of the smart speakers and voice assistants that you have today. And really, all of the technology behind the devices being able to understand you, being able to process your words, and being able to provide feedback from those devices or actions based on those devices. So the top 10 technology providers today are Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Apple Siri, and Samsung Bixby. So your voice engagements with any of these providers can be as simple as getting the weather, or as more complex as your branched engagements, where you're led down a path and based on your responses to questions, the next thing that happens is personalized to you. Now, what makes voice special today can easily be exemplified by looking at a simple scenario. Let's say you want to finish your favorite show or watch the next episode on your favorite show on Netflix. Let's say I want to get back to The Witcher. I can grab my remote, I can grab my mouse or my tablet, load up Netflix, do my search for The Witcher, find the episode I want to watch, and then finally start watching it. Now, let's say my TV supports Amazon Alexa. That interaction is completely different. It's as simple as saying, Alexa, continue my next episode of The Witcher. And right away, your TV, if it supports Alexa, will turn on, Netflix shoots up, and right there you're in your Witcher. And that really exemplifies what is so special about voice technology today. And it is that it saves you time. And that single fact is the reason why I personally believe that voice is here to stay. Now, I'm going to switch gears slightly to give a sense of where we can find voice technology today. So there's TVs, so there's that. Basically, voice technology today is part of the DNA for smart TVs. So every television you see coming out today is either going, or moving forward in 2020, is either going to have Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, or Samsung Bixby, some version of a voice assistant built in. Beyond the TVs, we've got, of course, the smart speaker devices. You've got some with screens, like the Amazon Echo Show and the Google Home, and some without, like the Echo Dots and the Google Home Minis. Now, the ones with screens are interesting, and we'll kind of get a sense of why they're interesting, especially in the conversation around market research, because they have visual components we can add, so it's not just voice. Beyond the voice assistants, or the idea of smart speaker, when you look at voice technology in a bigger spectrum, you start to see that voice is becoming the interface of choice for every major appliance and consumer electronics manufacturer out there. So you've got Samsung, Whirlpool, KitchenAid, all including voice technology in their refrigerators, microwaves, and ovens. And I'll tell you, there's nothing cooler than saying, hey, Google, preheat the oven to 350 degrees while you're on your way home from a soccer game. Looking at providers like Kohler, they're including voice in everything from their shower systems, their mirrors, even their toilets. So you can set the temperature of your shower, you can set the brightness of your mirror, or set the temperature of your toilet seat using just your voice. That last one is particularly cool if you've ever seen it. Looking at automobiles, you've got BMW, Lexus, Toyota. Every major manufacturer today is including voice as part of that automobile structure and technology that they're building right into the systems. Now, what I want you to think about when it comes to market research is how we can position market research to the endpoint of these experiences. And by endpoint, I mean every one of these devices is an endpoint. Every one of these devices provides a different opportunity for an experience in market research. So whether it's the refrigerator, the oven, or even the shower head, those are where things get very interesting when it comes to market research. These new endpoints are where the opportunity truly is for market research. Let's consider a simple example. Say you've got a new pair of sneakers and you want to get some market research information on it. What voice enables you to do is really get some of that interaction in real time while the consumer is actually having the experience. You've got voice-enabled headphones, you've got them out there running on the track, and you can actually get their feedback while they're engaging with a set of sneakers. Now, getting that kind of information, that kind of proximity to the consumer is what's super vital and super powerful when it comes to voice technology today. Now, this kind of research, of course, we can do in person or even via telepresence. But voice technology today gives us something these other options don't, which is affordable scale. The cost of conducting this type of just-in-time research via voice technology is considerably lower than any of the other options that are available out there. Voice as a research modality checks off a lot of those essential check boxes, a lot of those boxes that we look for when we're considering market research. Voice technology is at a point where consumer adoption and technical sophistication is in an ideal cross point. And I can toss up a bunch of stats, but some of these are my favorite. The first one is about 24% of US adults, or about 80 million people today, own a smart speaker device. Of those, homes that have smart speakers, at minimum, each home has 2. While 54% of US adults report having used voice commands on either like a smart speaker or a smartphone, 24% of those report having used voice commands every single day. So if you look at the numbers, that's about 43 million Americans today are using voice commands every single day. Now, I can honestly say from a builder of technology that these numbers are purely coming from the perspective of voice as a utility versus voice as an experience. It's purely driven by, there's no like real killer app yet out there in voice technology. We're just scratching the surface on adoption and engagement right now. And what I'd like to see is as brands, companies, researchers embrace voice, these adoption numbers are going to grow exponentially. Now, this one is one of my favorite stats of all. Voice technology in its present form, smart speakers, voice assistants, is actually the fastest, most adopted technology in history. The television, it took 13 years to reach 50 million homes. It took smart speakers just under 3 years. And the trends aren't showing any slowdown when it comes to voice adoption. While the industry news providers talk about primarily smart speakers, right? The Echo, the Google Homes, we already looked at all the extensions of that technology. It's coming into our cars, it's coming into our refrigerators, into our ovens, and so on and so forth. So the speed at which the adoption is actually going is much faster than just the sale of the most recent smart speakers. For 2020, we're predicting 30% of web browsing will be voice-driven. By the end of the year, 50% of all web searches will be driven via voice. PwC did a study of across 1,000 people, 50% of which had made a purchase using just their voice. And I want to take this second just to go back to a previous point. I touched on kind of what the experience is for market research when it comes to leveraging those endpoints, right? So you've got the headphones, you got wireless opportunities there, you've got the ovens, the toilets, the cars, and so on and so forth. So what I want you to consider is how you can leverage voice to create a unique experience when it comes to market research. So let's look at a couple of examples. Say you want to understand the cooking habits of amateur chefs. Then why not create an engagement via voice that invites them to actually provide their feedback while they're cooking? We want to understand the user experience of a particular fitness product on single moms. How about creating an engagement that invites them to engage while they're actually working out and using the product? Design your experience so you get them to engage and get that proximity to the experience as close as possible. I want to see us use voice in market research as a way to create these types of compelling experiences that drive people to want to participate and want to participate repeatedly. So I've put together a few use cases that I want to share that will highlight where the key opportunities are when it comes to market research. My daughter, my oldest daughter, Alexa, we'll get back to that in a minute, turns 10 in just a couple of weeks. And just the other day, she turns to me and says, you know, Daddy, I was born in I was very lucky to be born when I was. As a dad will be, I was super inquisitive to see what her perspective was. And her response to me, no joke, was, well, Dad, 2 years after I was born, the iPad was created. Wow. And a couple of years later, the Amazon Alexa came out, and she's got my name. I'm famous. That conversation completely happened. And just as a side note, can you guess about how long it took for us to change the Amazon wake word when we first brought the Echo into the house? It took about 30 seconds. And I'll tell you, my youngest, who's 6 now, and I'm pretty sure her first sentence had Amazon in it somewhere, which is really weird. So there's a point to this, I promise. So who here knows what an Amazon Alexa skill is? Awesome. For the rest of us who don't, an Amazon Alexa skill is essentially is like what your app is in your phone. It's how we create these engagements, how we gather data, how we create these marketing experiences for users on Amazon Alexa. Every device, oddly enough, has a different name for it. So on your Google Assistant, it's called a voice app. On Samsung Bixby, it's called a capsule. We're not yet there with Siri, as they haven't opened that up to us yet, but I'm sure it'll be called something silly. So why is Alexa up on the screen? A couple of years ago, we had her test out an early version of an Amazon Alexa skill that was powered by True Reply. And this is kind of what that went like.
Ask True Reply for a bad crypto survey.
Are you ready to hear the available bad crypto surveys now? There is one survey available.
Yes.
To take a survey about the Bad Crypto podcast and earn 50 cents in True Coin, please say 1.
1.
You chose the Bad Crypto podcast. It has 2 questions, and you will earn 50 cents in True Coin by completing the survey. Please minimize background noise and make sure you are within range of your device while taking your survey. Ready to get started?
Yes.
Okay, here's your first question. What do you think about the Bad Crypto podcast?
Good.
Great. Here's your next question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much
So
fun...
I'm going to pause it there. It goes on for about another 30 seconds. But we witnessed a few important things from this interaction. The first one is the absolute and pure delight that you get from her. From every step in the process, she's just excited to have what amounts to a conversation with her Echo. And you can tell it, like it just comes out of her. The other, well, not the other, but before we get to that, she didn't have to learn anything to interact with this engagement. She just had to ask for it, and she was able to dive right into the experience. There was no typing addresses. There was no navigating menus. There was no learning curve at all. It was completely frictionless, and she was about 8 years old when we recorded this. So that brings up the next observation, which is her age. Because she could speak, she could interact. Regardless of her age, regardless of a lot of other factors, because she could speak, she could engage. So regardless of symptoms burden, for example, we do a lot of work in healthcare. If the participant can speak, they can engage. And that's something that's super special about voice, because it really starts to break down engagement barriers, and it starts to increase the possibility for participation. Related to that is the idea of language. Right? Voice technology today is making the idea of language as a challenge when it comes to us running our studies across different demographics more and more obsolete. At True Reply, for example, we support about 120 languages completely automated through any engagement. With that in mind, JFK is now trying the Google Assistant in the airport to reduce customer friction. What they've done is they've installed their Google Assistant across the traveler terminals, the traveler help desk, excuse me. So travelers, as they're coming through the terminals, can actually walk up to these devices, ask their question in their native language, and get a response or be directed to whatever it is they're trying to find. It's being tested within JFK as an essential piece of improving that traveler experience. So we're seeing that with voice, more and more of these barriers start to break away. Now, I talked earlier a little bit about the proximity to the customer, that idea that the closer we are to the consumer experience, the better the data we get, which I think we'll all kind of agree on. Proximity to the customer experience is a key objective when gathering feedback and in anything from product experiences to service experiences. So with that in mind, we'll take a look at what Nationwide did fourth quarter of last year. So they launched a promotion really to advertise their new Amazon Alexa skill. And along with that promotion, they offered a free Amazon Echo Auto for any new policyholders. Nationwide, like Allstate and Liberty Mutual, they see voice as an opportunity for the brand to go beyond the transactional nature of insurance, to get closer to the proximity of a consumer experience within their auto, and thus create more value for them. Voice in our cars offers a safe and alternative route to research that was not previously possible. You don't have a phone number to dial. You don't have to bring up your phone. All you have to do is really ask or be asked, and you get jumped right into the experience. Now, while this example is very specific to automobiles, Walmart and Target are both testing in-aisle devices to get closer to the customer experience. Consumers can walk up to these devices in specific stores. They can get information about products and their locations in stores. They can provide feedback on in-store experiences. They're investing in voice as a way to get closer to the customer, create more engagement, and ultimately gather more data about their customers. Now, consumers today expect more in every single way. If you're a consumer, as a consumer, if you want us to do something, it's got to be fast, easy, and engaging. If you get two of these, you got it right. If you get all three, you really got something special. And when it comes to voice, that's the exact opportunity you have to create something special. Stephen King is one of the most recognized and prolific names in horror. And the Stephen King library that's available on Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant is the perfect example of what I like to call a market research experience. Rather than a study, I look at the market research experience as a way of engaging participants in new and novel ways and getting participants to not only while we entertain them, we get the data that we want to get out of them. Fans of Stephen King and new people to Stephen King alike can jump on the Stephen King library experience and take what amounts to a survey. You jump through a few questions, and what you get back is a personalized recommendation on what Stephen King books you're most likely to enjoy. Let's see what that experience is like.
What Stephen King book should I read next? Alexa, open Stephen King library.
Welcome to the Stephen King Library. We will guide you through a series of questions. Follow your imagination and curiosity. Your answers will allow us to recommend a personalized reading list of Stephen King books best suited to you. If you're ready to start, just say begin.
Now, it's a simple and novel experience that on the surface is intriguing to readers, but really underneath the surface, Stephen King is getting a wealth of customer data. And they can use that data to position future books and future experiences for their customers. Now, I want to wrap up by saying that while we've touched on voice in smart speakers and voice assistants, voice goes well beyond just Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Apple Siri, and Samsung Bixby. The technology today that drives these devices started and has its roots in the first voice-first device ever created, the telephone. As such, we can't ignore, while smart speakers and voice assistants are getting all the attention today, that voice, in every shape or form, is the most pervasive telephone in all its forms, is the most pervasive voice device out there. Pew Research shows that 96% of Americans have a cell phone. 62% of people worldwide have a cell phone. And this does not account for landlines, which, believe it or not, are still out there. Leaps in voice technology are easily leveraged via telephone so that the kinds of experiences that are found on Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, you can create those same types of experiences via telephone. Who here is familiar with the Corona hotline? So Corona, the NFL, and Tony Romo, they teamed up to create what amounts to an automated voice experience via telephone. So fans of football can call in, they can get predictions on the games of the day, they can participate in what is essentially a voice game where you're making play calls on simulated situations, and they can get Tony Romo's reflections on the day's games.
The Corona hotline is back, people. New year, new operator, same hotline. Romo here.
Tony, my fantasy team is down. I can't even watch. What do I do?
All right, grab a Corona.
Got it.
Now go back.
As you can guess, Tony is not actually answering those calls. The Corona hotline is the perfect example of an automated market research experience delivered via telephone. And you don't need a smartphone or a cell phone or even just any phone you can engage. Voice is definitely the new frontier for research, and I think we could see that both the numbers and the research show that consumers are not only ready to engage, but they actually want to have these types of experiences. So it's no longer should we, but how do we? How do we create compelling market research experiences that leverage and capitalize on voice technology today? That's all I got. Any questions? Yes, sir.
That was great, thank you. So you mentioned natural language processing. And I know there's a lot of technology in like tone of voice because there's more in speaking than just the actual words. Do you do anything with that, or is the technology not quite there yet for you?
We do tonal analysis, but we can do it only in specific scenarios, right? Because with devices like the Amazon Alexa Echoes, the Google Homes, we've got a lot of TOS and privacy policy issues there, which I wholly believe we'll overcome. But right now, all of our tonal analysis technology is really on the telephone side, which we leverage a lot within healthcare as well as market research.
I have another question, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
This is all fascinating. Does Amazon, Google, there's a lot of other information that they have access to that they've obviously monetized. Do they play ball at all in letting anybody tap into anything?
That is the deepest moat and the highest walls right now, for obvious reasons. I mean, it's what's driving Amazon, and it's something that Walmart and Target are still trying to figure out more than anything, is voice commerce. Which I didn't touch on much here because it kind of falls a little bit outside of like the market research already, but it's really what's driving a lot of their motives around Amazon Alexa. Yeah.
So just in general, I mean, it seems like you just spoke to privacy a little bit here. So it's fully opt-in, just like text message surveys would be, right? So essentially, I'd have to be able to tell someone, say I wanted them to take an Alexa survey, and I guess I'd have to create that product then for Alexa and Google and whatever else, because not everybody's going to have multiple different brands in their home, correct? So, and I don't know if there's any kind of specific demographics around who might actually have an Alexa versus who's going to have a Google Home, and maybe you can speak to that too, but is it, I guess, what is it that I have to essentially prompt my Echo or whatever to give me a survey of some sort? So I'd have to have some knowledge already. So I would have had to have told someone through another format, like an email, to go to your Alexa and to take the survey. Versus what's the benefit, I guess, to a certain degree of that versus literally just click the link and take the survey then. Or maybe like that's what's still trying to get worked out, but.
You hit on a couple of different points, okay. So I'm going to try to tackle one at a time. If I missed any, if I miss any,
I agree with you
yeah.
Future, but it's like I just feel like
No.
so.
I get it, and it's are you from the States?
Yeah.
Okay, I asked that only because that's a very big point that we hear from a lot of European companies. They're a little bit confused about how they actually implement this. Yeah. So I'm going to try to hit each of your points, so if I miss any, let me know. So the first is always the conversation around, do I need to do this across all devices? right? And what we generally tell our clients and our partners is that the market right now, there are about 100 billion worldwide devices that are voice first. So like those smart speakers and that are voice assistant driven. 70% of that is Amazon Alexa powered. 70%. And that study was run by like mid 2019, so we're actually waiting for new numbers to come out because we actually believe that gap closed because of some other industry stuff that happened. So that was the first piece. The second piece that I want to touch on, which is actually something that we struggle to convey a lot, especially with our market research clients and partners, is voice is not a new and mystical way of doing things. It's just another modality. So a lot of the same methodologies that you get to participants to engage, they apply. They've got to be incentivized one form or another, and they've got to be informed of this experience one form or another. The one thing I do want to kind of really push for, because it's something I believe in honestly when it comes to voice, is don't approach it how you might any other study or any other research kind of thing. Approach it from the perspective of the market research experience. Like that example with Stephen King is the ideal example of what we can do with market research, because it is this super engaging experience that you can have, whether you're a fan of Stephen King or not. But on the flip side of that, it gives them so much data. And that's the kind of thing that we can do with voice technology. I feel like there's one thing I missed, one point I missed.
So, I mean, so for something like the Stephen King experience, obviously that was something that someone put a lot of advertising towards.
Yeah, it was primarily promoted across social media, across YouTube, and they drove people to that. So there's still, and it's something I think we're seeing on the voice side, is not all that dissimilar from what we saw with mobile apps, which is early on, if you were in that space at all, one of the troubles we had within mobile apps was discoverability. Like you couldn't get your app discovered. And it was down here, then it peaked where things were getting discovered and it was easy, and then it went back down because now there were so many apps that you couldn't get discovered. So we had the problem on both sides. Voice is kind of experiencing that as well. And it's something that Amazon specifically is looking into because they are the largest marketplace for voice apps right now. And that discoverability problem is a problem, right? So we're still, that's why when we work with our clients and our customers, we really help them both not only create the engagements and get the data out of them, but also figure out, all right, what's the brand recognition plan behind this? What's the incentivization, and so on and so forth. Kind of thing like that.
Just can you speak really quickly to the incentivization? Yeah. So if you're doing things through Alexa, do you typically incent back to Amazon? I mean, I'm just kind of wondering or how does that usually play out?
So that's a good question because it tees up a couple of different things for me. But so by incentivization in the macro sense, it's just how you get people to click that link or install that skill, right? How you get them to actually engage. It's actually one of the reasons we offer both Amazon Alexa and telephone, so that we, as an organization, when you launch a study, you have the ability to drive people to both. On the incentivization side, we've got the market research experience, right, which is one thing. But then you also have the entire ecosystem around voice surveys, which is actually one that we, as a company, spearheaded just a couple of years ago. And TrueReply, for example, has built-in incentivization that we arbitrage if you want to leverage that. So it's there. But I still, I'm trying to be impartial here and not tell you too much about what TrueReply can do. We can do a lot. But it really comes back to your basics, right, of how you incentivize participants to engage. But the one thing that we have found, two stats that I will that are super interesting, is one, once you get them in there, we've got about 95% completion rate, between 95 and 90. So once they get engaged with an experience, they always complete it. There's like 0% drop off. It's crazy.
What's your average length?
The average length is very subjective, right? Because we do across industry kind of engagements. So we have market research, we have hospitality, we have healthcare. So depending on what you're doing, but we do have best practices. So we try to keep it, especially on like the Amazon Alexa side, 3 to 5, kind of when we're talking about questions. Mind you, like, again, I fall back to the Stephen King, which we're doing a couple of engagements that are similar to that. Like we have one, for example, a client of ours is a speaker out of Seattle. And she's going to have a couple of things happen over the course of the next few months. She's got her first book coming out in a couple of weeks. She's got a book coming out a month later, and then a TV show. And we're building what's called, what's basically going to be the Lindsay experience, right? And her approach to it is going to be slightly different than, like surveys. She's going to be, for example, she's going to start the Lindsay experience by reading a chapter of a book, and then having you answer something about the book or make a request or something like that. So it's going to have a bit of the engagement side where you get to experience almost like you're speaking to Lindsay, while at the same time she's going to be able to gather some of that data. So when we say like, what's the average questions, it depends what you're positioning for.
So I've got a comment and then a question. I think just as a comment that this is great stuff. I mean, it's really interesting. I think maybe you're thinking too narrowly about the role of voice in market research, because as it becomes the way that people connect to their computers, it's going to have to be part of every single survey that happens. Market research needs to have representative samples. And if you have people who only connect, or whose primary or preferred connection to the computer is voice, at least part of the time, then if you have a survey that doesn't have voice in it long term, you're not going to have a representative sample. So I think research needs to move towards being device agnostic, and voice is clearly the next comer. We saw a chart this morning that showed that mobile was more than 60% of all surveys, and I think we're going to see the same thing with voice. We're going to have to, if we want to continue to have representative samples. So I think bigger, not just like voice-specific excursions, which is great, but think about it as how it integrates. And this is where my question comes in.
Yeah.
What can you do in terms of integration with, say we're using our platform that we use for doing questions. How can we integrate voice into that in a fairly straightforward way?
Before I answer that, I completely agree with your reflection there. And I just want to clarify, like, the stuff I shared is like voice today, not voice 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because the landscape, as I mentioned, as I touched on very quickly, voice is, for all intent and purposes, for people like me, the future of interaction. It's just fast, it's easy, it's direct, it's a no-brainer kind of thing. When you think about autonomous vehicles and telling your car where you want to go, that's a lot of the technology that we're working on in TrueReply, is behind kind of what that experience is going to be like. So I completely agree that it's much bigger than just what I'm touching today, but I was trying to this is what we can do today kind of thing, where you can go home today and you can actually execute in this, rather than trying to shove a whole big pie down your throat kind of thing. So from an integration point, we actually provide a lot of different options when it comes to integration. We provide a full inbound and outbound API. So depending on how sophisticated your internal teams are, depending on how sophisticated you want to get with integrating voice into your overall experience, you have an API that you can leverage for that. And at the same time, we provide kind of everything. Anyone who's spoken to me about TrueReply before this talk, I always talk in spectrums, because we have a very kind of simple, no risk, quick way of getting started in voice, and all the way over here we've got more sophisticated, voice sampling and all this kind of really cool stuff, dynamic APIs and webhooks and all this kind of stuff. So it's definitely a spectrum of what that integration could be like. But we provide different ways of, for example, say you've got a web form and you've got 5 questions on it, but 2 of them you'd really like to get a voice response on. So you get them, to answer their 4, and then you present them with a click that actually triggers a TrueReply powered kind of voice engagement. So there's that type of integration. And we do similar kind of things on the app layer as well, where you can hit a button and it actually throws you into what is essentially powered by TrueReply.
Cool.
Anyone else? Cool. Well, thank you very much. I'm here if you have any other questions. I appreciate your time. Thank you.